Welcome to Hear From Where, a podcast about the journeys that shape us. I'm your host, Chef Andrew Garrett, and each week I'll sit down with incredible individuals who've carved their own paths in health, nutrition, entrepreneurship, sports, and beyond. This is where we dive deep into the stories of determination, resilience, and passion, the moments that brought them here, from where they started. Whether you're looking for inspiration, a spark to start your own journey, or just love hearing amazing stories, then you're in the right place. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's explore what it really takes to follow your dreams. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Hear From Where podcast. My name is Chef Andrew Garrett. I am your host, and today I am joined by Simon Cartwright of Cartwright Truffle down in Cottage Grove, Oregon. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Andrew.
I was fortunate enough to get down there and visit with you, see the orchard, get to know you, and make some sausage rolls, as well as walk around the orchard and see what you guys got going. I'm extremely excited to break some of the myths and get into the science of truffles and what makes them so special and why what y'all are doing is really almost, I don't want to say one of a kind because it's not the only, but you're really leading the way when it comes to truffle cultivation in America. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Leading the way, I guess that's just by us getting into the industry at its earliest days.
Yeah. And how long have you all been doing it?
We planted our first part of our orchard in 2009. So it's been 17 years.
17, yes, 17. Oh my gosh.
17 years now.
My math is terrible.
Yeah, we have various plant outs. We're getting to the stage where we're contemplating what to do with actually the oldest part of the orchard at the moment.
Okay, now I'm going to ask the obvious question here is, how did you all get started in this?
Well, it's a very long story. Try and make it short. We came across, my wife Lynette and I were living in Australia. You can tell.
Yeah, people know. They can hear it.
My wife was working Department of Ag doing aphid research, and I was doing all the wineries in the southwest of Western Australia. And in '97, they basically started their industry and found their first truffle, and it was like, well, that's interesting. That's kind of cool, exciting little bit of agriculture happening in a little part of the world that no one really knows about. And a few years later, in '06, we moved over to my wife's home state of Oregon. I didn't want to be a farmer. Her family, Filbert farmers, and I was very adamant that I wanted nothing to do with farming. I wanted to live on the cafe strip and watch the beautiful people go by. And a year later, I was looking for a property to start a farm, which is what happens. I have to apologise. Our little girl has decided to join us. She's going through a little bit of teething at the moment, so she's bringing her squeaky toy to
fantastic. And what is her name?
This is Matilda. She's an apprentice truffle dog at the moment. She's only 20 weeks.
20 weeks. So she's learning how to be able to truffle. And I mean, that's one of the things, too, with what y'all are doing is this is not a human scent type setup. You guys are using dogs to get out there and sniff the truffles. And I'll get myself way too far ahead if I get going on that. So
back to the story.
So we're in 2006, and so what is this little part of Australia that nobody knows about? Because
there's a little town called Mancham up in the southwest of Western Australia. It's about. I apologise for this. Play with this one. Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew. Kids and dogs, you can't teach them when to not come to the party. So we were. Do we pause? Yeah. So
Okay, and we're back. So we were jumping into Manjamup.
management,
Mump.
Mange. It's a small little. Used to be a logging town in the southwest of West Australia, about 4 hours south of Perth in WA. And believe it or not, they used to do about 80% of the Southern Hemisphere's European black truffle.
Wait a minute, a European black truffle coming from Australia?
Yes. When we talk about that, it's an Australian winter truffle, but it's actually it's the Tuber melanosporum species, so primarily grown there. So it's the same. If you were in France, it would be a Perigord. The Italians grow them, the Spanish grow them, the Ukrainians grow them. So it's all one of the very many species of uh, tuber that we see out there in the world.
Okay, so we're not going to get in trouble with people from like Champagne and start calling, no one's going to call me up and email me about, no.
No, no, because very little Perigord truffle is now grown in Perigord. Uh,
Really?
a lot of it comes from Italy and Spain nowadays that's imported.
Wow. That's fascinating. So down there, Lynette is doing aphid research.
Yep.
Y'all come back home.
And
You are going to drink coffee on the street and watch everybody go by. And Lynette says, I want to farm.
well, we were looking at it. It was, we heard through her brother that there was some people inoculating trees here in Oregon. Just started inoculating trees, and it was like, well, this is interesting. And on our wedding anniversary that year, we happened to be at King Estate, and it was also happened to be the second year the Oregon Truffle Festival was running. And they offered us either the a la carte menu, or two people were not at the dinner and did we want to have the truffle dinner. And by the time we got to the dessert, I was okay, we're putting in a truffle orchard.
It was that easy, huh?
Yeah, it was the bug. It just, there was an old cartoon where the gambling bug would come up and give the guy a bite, and when he'd roll the dice one more time. It's pretty much that for truffling as well.
That's fantastic. So you yourself were inoculated with the enamoring journey of becoming a trophée.
Yeah, yeah. It just seemed interesting and seemed something that led naturally to Lynette's research and how she wanted to study something other than aphids. So it seemed to work in very well with us.
That's so cool. Now, when you say inoculating trees, what kind of trees are truffles? Because what I'm used to are going out to the woods. I don't have dogs that find truffles, but what I've learned in previous years is you can go out to the woods and you kind of like look underneath deciduous trees or like Doug firs, sometimes oaks, and you can kind of see where voles and mice and squirrels have often dug into the ground. And a lot of times I was able to pull back some of the ground covering and find white truffles buried there.
Yeah,
Now,
the Oregon native whites. So we have several hundred tuber species in the world, but there's only a certain amount that are actually culinary. Uh, Different trees have a different relationship with the different species. Uh, so when you look at like the Oregon white, the tuber Oregonese, that is probably the most popular winter truffle in Oregon. We also have the Pacific Northwest or an Oregon black truffle, which is actually not actually in the tuber species, but it is considered a truffle. And then you have spring truffle here in Oregon, and recently a pink truffle as well that's got a culinary ability to it. They're found attached primarily to Doug fir. We have some that are attached to the native oaks, but different profiles, different aroma profiles, different uses in the culinary world. The European varieties that we see most often, tuber magnatum, which is the absolute crown jewel of all truffle. That's the also known as the Italian white truffle or the Alba truffle. There's a lesser version called tuber borkii, which has started to take off here in America. As they've been having some good success cultivating it on pines, loplollies, and stone pine. We've got obviously Perigord, or tuber melanosporum, which we grow. That's probably the most cultivated truffle in the world. Backing up to tuber magnatum, a French group claim to have cultivated it, but they've never been able to repeat the experiment. No one else in the world's ever been able to cultivate it. No one knows how. We've actually got 30 poplar that are actually inoculated with it because, hey, if you crack the code, you'll know.
Yeah.
Actually, no one will know. I'll be buying land.
Right. Yeah. Like all of a sudden, boy, I'm seeing Cartwright, showing up on land ownership here all over the place. That BLM land's going to be gone.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
guy.
But it's and then you've got the summer truffle, like burgundy, often known as tuber burgundy truffle. So you've got
Fascinating.
and odsummatum in that family. They're actually both the same species, but they produce at different times, and so they're qualified as different subspecies.
That's so cool. And so I spent the weekend helping a buddy of mine who has a truffle hot sauce that he makes. And, a lot of folks are really, I realize that a lot of people don't know what truffles are or really understand them. Are truffles a mushroom?
They're a fungus.
They
I
are a
mean,
fungus.
when we talk about like mushroom, what we're really talking about is the fruiting body of a fungus. Uh, and in the case of mycorrhizae or the tuber family, the truffle is the fruiting body.
Very cool.
There's still in the mycelium in the soil. There's an interaction with some form of sugar source. So for a lot of the mushrooms that people know, it's like, oh, it grows in compost. Well, it's actually getting a sugar from the compost. For the mycorrhizae family, they actually get fed sugars from the tree.
They get fed sugars from the tree. And this is a really fascinating thing. This really actually blew me away when I was out there and we were talking about it. Could you break that down and how that symbiotic relationship works between the truffle and the tree? Because I love the way you describe it. I'm not gonna steal this. Like this is gold.
Well, it's not a Disney symbiotic relationship. It's more like a hostage negotiation. We're coming to understand. A lot of people don't realise that the research on mycorrhizas and in general is so small. It's really been pioneered actually at Oregon State. Jim Trappy is considered the godfather of the whole scientific movement on mycorrhizae, and people go to Oregon State from all over the world, come here to do their doctorates, etc., just because it is a wealth of knowledge here. So, the relationship is not well understood, but what currently kind of happens, we believe, is the feeder roots of the tree actually get encased by the mycorrhizae. And this gives them the opportunity to be, it's like a force multiplier. It actually expands through the soil and gives the tree a lot more feeding ability, because the fungus will actually pull nutrients from the soil and pass it to the tree. In response, the tree pushes sugar back to the truffle or back to the fungus to feed it, because funguses cannot create their own sugars. And so it relies on the tree's photosynthesis and stored energy pushing back into the soil, and in return it passes on things like nitrogen, phosphorus, magnesium, to the tree, and it's not understood how the actual interchange and discussion takes place. It's one of those things that no one can really explain. I hope someone does one day, because we're trying. One of the key things as someone who is trying to cultivate truffle is how do we encourage that relationship? Because the more sugar we get in the soil, the greater chance we have of fruit production.
That's so cool. So I envision it very much so as I'm an extroverted person, and a lot of times people make fun of me. They're like, you take introverts and you grab them up and you just like hold on to them, and then they get all this new friendship, and like you create this thing around you. I'm like, well, maybe I'm kind of a truffle. Is you're kind of even though you're against the tree's will, holding it, but at the same time, it's feeding it nutrient and giving it, the life that it needs
Yeah.
as well.
So, is it Stockholm syndrome? Is it you know, being married to an introvert? I can tell you, they don't. She probably wouldn't like that analogy.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna save that one for later times.
but uh, the the relationship really is.
Mutually beneficial for both parties.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to enjoy a little bit. So once you have, you talk about inoculating. So are you taking like a truffle puree of sorts, and just taking a giant syringe and pumping it into the ground, or
No,
what's that look like?
the tree growers who do the inoculation are very secretive about how they actually do the process. And
Oh, the tree growers are inoculating. So that process takes place before it hits your orchard.
yeah, like we do have a wild hazelnut uh, species here. We've got ones for oaks, native oaks. We've got competing fungi, mycorrhizal fungi, that want to invade the root system and take it over for themselves. And so trees have to be, from nut to before they get planted, they get uh, inoculated with the specific variety of truffle we're trying to grow. And it's
Fascinating.
that the tree growers are a very secretive bunch on how they do it. We just know what we're looking for in a tree, and what sort of percentage we want on a root system, and we need the variety of the mating types on there. So it's people ask us, oh, I've got a filbert orchard. Can you come out and inoculate it? And it's like, no, sorry, it's already got a species on it to help it.
That's cool.
It's a very when you look at it, things like phosphorus abound in the soil to iron and other and form a molecule. What actually we believe happens is that the the mycelium is only about 8 micron thick, and it actually touches against the grains in the soil. It works with bacteria to they excrete a organic acid, and that actually breaks the molecular bond. The mycelium grabs the say phosphorus, drags it back to the tree, and the tree gets its nutrients that way. So typically, a tree with a good mycorrhizae structure will grow 20-25% better than a tree without in our soil types. In soil types like Australia, where it's very low phosphorus, it just is the difference between the tree surviving or not surviving. So it has that a very big imperative. That's probably why they're so good at it there. But here in Oregon, we've got different soil types. We're still trying to understand that part of the whole interaction.
Right. And so, if that isn't enough to help people understand why truffles are so expensive, uh, let's talk about what kind of yield. Because I think that a lot of times folks they don't, there isn't a lot of clear, this is why this is such a expensive thing. And I mean, basic economy tells us that, supply and demand is what drives price. But a lot of times in the culinary world, folks see something as, oh, this is going to be, $100 a gram. Why in the world is this so expensive? And that, I'm just throwing out numbers, folks. Don't quote me on anything because I made that up.
Retail for first class this year was about $3.20 a gram.
Okay, so I was short. Yes, see, don't quote me on anything, folks.
Yeah, it's when you look at the economics of it, if you're looking at like the native truffle here in Oregon, if you've got a place set of pines that produces 2 to 3 pound an acre, you've got a honey hole, and people guard those little spots very. No one will take you out to their little honey hole of Doug Fir stand if they're pulling those sort of numbers out of it. For our purposes, because we are cultivating, we are farming, we're typically we're shooting for over 30 pounds an acre, hopefully around the 80 pound an acre mark. Now, saying that, it is an exponential growth pattern. As you can imagine, as a fungus moves away from the tree into the soil, it takes a lot of time for that to happen. But the surface area gets exponentially greater the further away from the tree it moves. And so typically, an orchard, if it's well looked after, if the trees were bang on when they were inoculated, I think trees are running about $50 to $60 a tree at the moment. You're looking at maybe year 5, you might see a truffle on a tree.
Wow.
Like running 100 trees, you might see a truffle. By year 10, it's kind of starting to break even. Year 13, you're starting to actually see profit from it. So it is a very long road to get with no guarantees, and it's yeah, it's
So
it's a friend of mine in Australia has a saying that year 10 your wife stops talking to you, year 11 the bank manager stops talking to you, but year 13 the John Deere salesman starts talking to you.
So that's crazy. So with that in mind, does that mean that a lot of orchards, truffle orchards, are multi-generational? Like,
Sorry,
did
hip rules. We may have to pause
Matilda,
for a second.
Matilda,
Tell it. Thank
calm
you.
yourself, dog.
Happy face. The joys of having a teething puppy.
Yes, this is true. So, with everything in mind, with the 5-year mark, maybe you get one. Does that mean that a lot of truffle farms are multi-generational? Does that mean that there are like folks that are planting in the hopes that their great grandkids will be
No, unfortunately,
billionaires?
because the orchard only really has a 25 to 30-year lifespan. Because once the trees get to a certain age, they're not actually pushing. They're not needing to utilize so many nutrients. They push out of the leaves, for instance, it pushes into the trunk instead of into the roots, and so the tree has less use for the truffle. So that interchange becomes less important to the tree. It doesn't need to provide as much sugars back to the fungus. And eventually different funguses take over because they provide different things that the tree needs.
That's amazing. So you're looking at a quarter of its life is not producing, and then at 25, 30, now we're out of it again. So you're in this constant process of planning. You're in a 5-year planning stage every year.
With what we know now, it's realistically half the life of the orchard is not producing enough for it to be profitable, but it is produced. It has started to produce. But then the second half is if you've done everything right, and we're still learning how to do everything right for the American conditions, it can produce the revenue. it's why truffle are so expensive. The amount of time and effort into getting a crop, maybe, and a lot of the orchards end up getting abandoned because people get to year 7 or 8 and they just go, "I'm not throwing more money at this,"
Wow.
because it's let's back it up a little.
Okay, I'm in.
So this is one of those things with the Oregon and Pacific Northwest. Calm jets, baby. Uh, the Oregon truffle, our natural soil, the pH is anywhere from like 5.7, 5.8 to 6.3, 6.4, which makes it a very acidic soil. For the production of melanosporum, we're actually looking for 7.4 to 8-ish for our pH. So that's a really good thing, and that's the reason I bring that up is because one of the questions that we always get asked is, "Oh, you're introducing a foreign species into the soil. How do you feel about that?" And coming from Australia with cane toads and rabbits, and it hasn't worked well in Australia introducing foreign species. So as an Australian, I'm very, very conscious of that. We actually have a natural barrier because our soil pH has to be so high for it to compete. It generally won't move outside the orchard. But at the same time, it's also a good natural barrier for us. The native truffle generally does not do well in that pH structure.
Interesting. So you guys are mending the soil as you go and kind
Yeah,
of creating.
it's
That
an
is
insane amount of. When we planted our last section, I ended up putting down about 40 ton in the acre of lime, and the poor guy from the ag supply, he's like, "My truck will only do 1.5 tons an acre in the metering," and it's like, "Just keep doing laps, brother. Just keep doing." That's one of the things. Part of what Lynette and I do is we help new growers as well to start and manage orchards. And one of the key things that we always hear from people who have a non-producing orchard is that, "Oh, I only put down like 5 ton of lime," and it's like, that's not enough to actually drive. There's technical reasons for it, but there's not enough parts per million of calcium in the soil for it actually to produce truffle. So they were doomed from the start because the ag guy told them, "Oh, that's way too much lime to put down for trees."
right. That's so cool. So I mean, it's interesting because I wouldn't think of acidity playing such a role in something that, to my palate, isn't super acidic. I think that I generally assume more acidity would make something more acidic.
Well, it's basically it's controlling what bacterial processes happen in the soil.
Mm.
That's without going on a 2-hour lecture on nitrification, denitrification, and in the soil.
Right. No, that is so cool, and those are the things that I'm fascinated with. And I love how much effort goes into creating something so special. And when you talk about it being so special, is that I would love to dive into the culinary properties of truffles too, because I think that I learned something when we were down, checking out the orchard when we were making those sausage rolls. Is I asked you, I was like, "Hey, why aren't you adding salt to this mixture?" So I was mixing everything together. I'm looking at it, I'm like, "Well, why aren't we adding any salt to it? Why don't we add salt when we're
Uh,
adding truffle?" That blew my
well,
mind.
we do, but we add a lot less.
Right. Okay. A lot
Um,
less.
one of the so when we look at truffle, it's the spore that creates the aroma, but a lot of the content in the actual body of the fruit is glutamic acid. And when that mixes with your saliva, it actually forms MSG naturally in your mouth. So it's replacing, it's acting as the replacement, but it's also why when we talk about truffle, they are a subterranean fruit. Uh, um, they have to be a fruit that something wants to dig for. So it's got to have a lot of sugar in there, so a lot of energy, and it's got to be tasty or create a taste profile. I think we were talking about this while you were here, like the Oregon native truffle, the whites. The Oregon flying squirrel, it makes up the majority of its winter food source. But in order to attract it in the ground, and squirrels in general, they're fast-moving rodents that it's got this big brass note that it puts out. If you've ever tried Oregon whites, they're very diesel. They've got a diesel component. They've got a garlic component. They've got a nut component to them, but when someone's got an Oregon white. Same with the Italian whites. It's just this huge aroma that comes off it, but it's it's very small window of volatiles that it's giving off. Whereas when you look at melanosporum, which we grow, it's attracting mammals, larger mammals that are slower moving on the ground. And so it's got a big library of volatiles it gives off. I think the last count that there was a paper released last year, it was like 212 or 230 different organic compounds that it gives off to attract mammals to eat it. But they're all a lot more subtle because it doesn't have to grab something racing past at 100 mile an hour.
Right, and that's why like pigs are more attracted to them, because I think that I associate pigs often to finding truffles versus dogs. I think that's one thing that I think about a lot.
Yeah, pigs really don't get used in the industry to hunt truffle. We use dogs. If you see the old vision of the truffle farmer in France, he's always got a big stick in his hand with his pig, because he's got to whack the pig off the truffle, otherwise the pig will eat it. Where, and a lot of them have missing fingers from trying to grab the truffle out of the mouth of the pig.
Okay, that's good to know for
Don't
future
stand between a
reference.
pig. Nicolas Cage did not get it quite right.
I wasn't going to bring up Nicolas Cage, but I wasn't going to bring him up because I had a lot of problems with that movie.
Yeah. The primary problem we all had is, look at the foliage. It's the wrong time of year. It's the wrong time. They filmed it for pretty, not for accuracy. But, it was good to see at least the native truffle was getting some sort of airtime. But
getting that recognition out there. One of my biggest pet peeves in the culinary world right now, and it drives me mad, is truffle oil or truffle essence. That I get bitter about this, not only palatably but also emotionally, because folks will list something as having truffle in it.
yeah.
And it's not the actual flavor of truffle. There's a hot sauce brand out there that adds truffle to their product, and it's not actually truffle. It's an oil.
Yeah, one of the problems that we do see with truffle, I mean, it's like growing tomatoes underground, and there also, and it's just like carrots or anything else. If you grow a product underground, you've got the chance of listeria and botulism if it's mishandled. That's one of the reasons you should never pack truffle in an anaerobic condition, such as in an oil, because if it's anaerobic and it's sitting on your shelf, it's above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a chance that you could be growing botulism in the bottle. So what the general thing people do who do like a truffle oil, where you see the little specks of truffle, hey, it's probably a tuberestivum in there, which is the summer truffle, because it's about a quarter of the price.
Okay.
Or it's Chinese truffle, which is just horrible, but they autoclave it and drive off and sterilize it. But you drive off all the volatiles by doing that. So then they put it in, and then they'll drop artificial truffle oil in there, which is also truffle essence, truffle aroma. But because I put the truffle in there, they can also say natural truffle flavour. And you hate to be the bearer of bad news to people telling them that. And personally, I don't like truffle oil, but I have nothing against people who do like it. I love it as a gateway drug to get people into truffle. But you're right. It's the mislabeling and the fact that they charge people so much for it. I mean, it's a byproduct of the majority of it is a byproduct of the petrochem industry. There are people who are using stems of mushroom to just try and extract that one thing, and that's where you get the natural aroma from. Uh, but by and large, it comes from Jersey. So I can buy a $20 jug of grapeseed oil, a $20 jug of artificial Fortu. Don't even try and get me to say phased. I can't even pronounce it. My tongue's too thick. But I can then bottle that and sell that, at $40 an ounce. It's a ripoff.
That's wild. And
That to me is the problem with it. It is it if people if they were selling it as artificial truffle oil at $5 a bottle, I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. But it's the misleading labeling and everything else that goes on that people. But again, I know I've got plenty of friends who like truffle fries, for instance, where they've used artificial truffle oil on them, and it's like fantastic for you. To me, it gives me the burps, so I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not a fan as well. But
now that said, friends of ours who own the Truffle Dog Company are doing a vacuum. They're actually doing a vacuum infuse on the oil, so they'll actually take truffle and vacuum the aroma and recirculate it through the oils and allow the volatiles to glom onto the oil that way. That is actually true truffle aroma. Problem is, the shelf life is so small that supermarkets don't really want to carry a more expensive product that's got 3 month shelf life.
Yeah, it's hard to sell something that's only really good for 3 months.
Yeah.
And we keep hitting on something, and it's a word that was I'm familiar with because of my work in the culinary industry and in shelf stability. But volatiles is when we're talking about volatiles, we're talking about the smell that the truffle is producing.
Yep.
And now, in order to really capture the essence, I also see truffles misused in a lot of ways, in my opinion, misused. One of the ways that I really love truffle is in like a butter or in a dough, something that's really fatty.
Yep.
And is that because the volatiles get kind of captured in that fat? What is it that helps bring that essence out? It is the fat?
Yeah, so the hydrocarbon volatile organic compound will actually hook onto fats and alcohols, and
Interesting.
different volatiles will hook onto different parts. The smell most people are familiar with the truffle is the volatiles that hook onto fats, because and this is why I'm the size I am, is because at this time of truffle season, because it's cooked, primarily used with like egg yolks, is where it'll glom on into the fats in the egg yolk, butter, cream, oils. So essentially, if you're going to cook good food with truffle, there has to be a fat component. Good steak, for instance, or lamb, it hooks onto the fat of the animal that way.
That's so cool. So alcohol. So this is something else that kind of blew my mind. Is I didn't think of alcohol as absorbing the flavor of truffle, but it's something that y'all have messed with significantly. So like you're talking about like making tinctures or actual distilling.
We're doing we play around with air infusion. There are distilleries out there that are playing around with the native truffle to actually far better at explaining it than I am. But we'll just suspend a truffle in a large jar with, say, a gin, and it'll actually air infuse the gin with the different set of volatiles. It really changes the flavor. It really adjusts it, and it's impossible to describe how it does it.
Yeah.
How it is. Unfortunately, we do that for family and friends because we're not running a HEPA filter and everything else that you really need to ensure that even though it's grain alcohol, it's still a chance that the botulism could move in there. But
That's so cool.
there are people experimenting who have got the full setup and everything, and it'll be interesting to see how they come on. Now, that said, Fast Penny Spirits up in Seattle do an Americano with native black truffle. So
Too cool.
they do produce what's the word I'm looking for? Aperol falls into the family.
Okay. Like an aperitif type drink.
Yeah, and they're doing good things with it up there. So it's a little niche thing that we're seeing out there.
Very cool. And now
By and large, for for people who are doing wanting to get life out of a truffle, you mentioned truffle butter. I've got stuff in my freeze. We make our own because obviously we get one of the privileges of being the farmer is that when you trim up truffle and clean it up, some of it just happens to fall into your lap and you just go, darn, I'm going to have to use that now, aren't I? And I make up a lot of truffle butter and then freeze it, and you normally get about 3 months lifespan out of that if it's prepared correctly.
That's awesome. So, and really, that's a pretty quick because it's an oxidization process, right? Is what kind of it's slowly losing its volatiles through oxygen, through air, over time. So
sorry to interrupt.
Oh, so no, please.
Let's. One of the things that we've found is with chefs, especially, and we hadn't heard this term until we took a group down to Australia last year to do. We took a group of food adventurers and truffle growers down to Manjimup to go to where they produce so much truffle and go around and to the restaurants there and actually see how it was being utilised in a local market. They had a term. It's called an 8-day truffle. So when we get chefs out to our place, a lot of times they smell and go, "That's not a truffle." And it's like, no, you're smelling the early VOCs that we lose in transport. When a ripe truffle comes out of the ground, it has so much broader depth to it. As you go through days between shipping and putting in the fridge and utilising it, we lose a lot of those. And so a lot of the recipes have been written around the world for an 8-day-old truffle out of the ground.
Interesting. So it's an entirely different. I've smelled truffles straight out of the ground, but a lot of that I hadn't really thought about the amount of time between ground and plate and the differences it makes. Working in some of the fancier restaurants that I worked in early in my career, we used to use truffles as this really like big bright thing, and you shave everything off, and then like you're saying, you wind up with the little nubs, the little bits at the end, and we would make butters out of them. So that makes sense. I'm glad I'm tracking on that. Like in that 8-day, so what is, in your opinion, what is the sweet spot for truffle utilization?
I think it's over. Typically you're only looking at a 2-week window from out of the ground to utilising it fully, and then it just, to me, gets a little lame after that. But that's quality problem we have, that we have access to fresh truffle. Different time. If you get a fresh truffle, you can infuse the first couple of days and capture those volatiles again. So, can we pause? Sorry.
You're good. So in talking about the aromas of the early truffle, like the early out of the ground.
Yep. So this is where you build, we call it a truffle locker. I don't know if there's an official term for it, but we get we encourage chefs and we encourage people at home who buy truffle. You get a large glass container and you wrap you've got there's a care and handling way of getting the life out of a truffle, but one of the key things is keeping it dry with paper towel, changing that daily, and keeping it below 40 degrees, somewhere between 34 and 40 degrees in your fridge, and that's how you get the maximum life out of it. But you obviously don't want everything in your fridge smelling of truffle. So you put it into, we use a large glass container, but we'll put eggs in there, we'll put butter in there, we'll put cream in there, and that'll all infuse while you're working out what you're going to be doing with it. So, day 3, grab some eggs, scramble them up with a little bit of the cream, and you've got truffled eggs without having to actually utilize any truffle in them.
Dang, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, and that's also kind of fascinating to me because, a lot of folks don't know that truffle season, like they start to ripen in the winter. And so I know because I asked the question when I was there. What is it about the winter that makes the truffle in season?
Well, different truffle, different seasons. Like summer
Okay.
truffle grow in very shady, darker, moist climate areas. So that kind of they've adapted to that sort of environment. The Alba truffle or the tuber magnatum, Italian whites, they're a late fall truffle. They go from late August all the way through November, and then Perigord kicks in. And I can only really speak on the Perigord or the tuber melanosporum. What we see happening is the fruit body actually expands in the soil late summer into fall. And by the end of fall, the trees are going dormant. We're seeing the sugars starting to taper off. And so it really relies on soil temperature dropping down to turn it into almost cold storage. And that's what people believe starts the maturation process. Maturing doesn't really start until the ground temperatures get down there to where the fruit can be protected from rotting out. And
Very cool.
And so our season starts, we typically, after the first frost in November, we're looking at about a month before we'll start seeing ripe truffle out there. And as the season goes on, obviously ground temperature gets colder and colder, deeper and deeper. And so the truffle are maturing deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, the problem we have is we have a warm December and the temperature gets above 50 Fahrenheit, we then start seeing stuff rot out because it's already matured, but there's nothing to keep it actually preserved in the ground. So again, another reason why that's so gosh darn expensive is it's not like you go out there and look at the nuts on a tree and go, okay, we're going to have this sort of harvest this year. It's very weather dependent on getting the maturity in the ground.
Very interesting. So, and I hadn't, again, I have never thought about the maturing. And as we talk about the maturing of the truffle, I also think about like the maturing of, say like chanterelle mushrooms. Very similar idea is it hits its mature point and then it starts to break down. So the ground getting cold is exactly that. It's that cold storage. It is the nature's.
And this is going on. What I understand is the current theories, because a lot of it is no one has done enough research yet to actually say this is the definitive reasoning. I mean, Oregon white truffle, everyone's like, oh yay, we got rain in November. That means we're going to have an early, and then there's nothing. It's one of the beautiful things about this industry. If you get 3 truffle experts in a room, there'll be 7 theories on how it all happens.
That's so wild. I mean, and you would think that it would have more of a understanding around it, but it's such a mythical item that all this time, no one really knows exactly what, why, where, when. It's constantly evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's when you look at the history of truffle, pre World War One, in France, a lot of people didn't consider it a true meal unless there was truffle on the plate. It was ubiquitous because they had so many oak forests, and people would go gather, and they had huge canning facilities and everything else. World War One comes along, and what happens to all the oak forests in France? They get smashed down by tanks and battlefields. And a lot of the younger men who knew where all the patches were, unfortunately, did not make it through the war. Then we get into World War II, same thing happens. And if you look at truffle production in Europe, it just plummets World War One, World War Two. That's when basically cultivation started occurring. And a lot of it was just let's put in a new oak forest. The methodology for reproducing truffle by planting acorns next to trees that are producing truffle was well known for over a century by then. However, this is one of the problems with growing truffle in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a native species. The French and the Italians and the Australians were all very smart. They went, oh, this is the soil types it grows in, and this is the areas. Let's just plant orchards in those areas. Where we in America have gone and put orchards in soil that is like a higher clay content, not as ideal drainage, not as ideal, the band of weather is completely different. So really the research on growing truffle in America is very, very young. It's only, sub 25 years. But even
Wow.
in the rest of the world, it was only the 80s and 90s that people actually started researching cultivation as an orchard and as an true agricultural crop. This is why the science is just, it's a very young field in science.
What a cool. So, I was talking about entrepreneurship in the agricultural space a couple weeks ago with my friend Grant, who's a farmer, and my friend Graham, not Grant, Graham, who's a farmer in Nebraska, and talking about, a lot of times there's kind of this societal image that entrepreneurship is limited to really looking at the tech industry or some sort of mechanical engineering, computer engineering, all these things. But there is so much available in the world of agriculture if we really start diving into it. And it sounds like with truffles, there's really an opportunity for expansion because the science is still going to be new, the research is going to be new, and every year y'all are learning something, and then folks like yourself are sharing that information out there. Are there a lot of people that are kind of jumping into the space?
We're still very much the early adopter. I believe we're at the early adopter stage. So when you look at that model of early adopters, then your first majority, second majority, and then the laggards. The industry here in America really has never got out of the early adopters because there's I'd say there's over 400 orchards in America. There's sub 30, I think, that are producing, and
Wow.
there's only I could count probably on one hand people who are actually in enough production to be able to sell.
Wow.
And it's simply because mistakes were made.
Right.
When the other thing is, it's a very secretive, can be a very secretive industry. So people who are successful generally don't share. I, I got questioned again. I go back to the Australian references because when we first started, let's go back to the beginning. uh,
It's what I do with this podcast is, folks know that I bounce around and they got to hang in. They got to hold on to get the nuggets.
So we planted our first trees in 09. I talked to the person who provided the trees to us in 11 and asked him, okay, I'm not a farmer. I do pump systems for a living. what am I supposed to do when? And he's like, well, the papers suggest. He's not a farmer. He's a scientist who inoculates trees. That's his gig. And so, okay, who in America can ask? Nobody. Because no one was producing at that point. We'd had Peter Marshall, not Peter Marshall, a guy in Tennessee who was being successful, but he'd retired. That was basically it for all of the US. But people had theories on how to. So I was fine. Who's the best in the world at this at the moment? And when he said, "Oh, the folks in Manjimup in Western Australia," I was like, "Great! I'm going there in 3 weeks to see family. Who's the person there?" And he gave me Dr. Nick Malachek's name, who was one of the co-founders of Truffle and Wine over there. This is kind of the phone call that Paul Nick got. "Hi, my name's Simon. I live in Oregon. You don't know me from a bar of soap, but I've got a 2-year-old orchard. I don't know what I'm doing. Can I pick your brain for half a day?" And he was so gracious and said yes. I got to his place. We hopped in his beat up old pickup. He asked me if I liked dogs. I said yes. So his dog lumped into my lap, and we went off down to the truffle orchards. And me being totally ignorant and totally, just not understanding the scope and everything, I think they pulled around 4 metric ton that year off the farm.
Wow.
So here we are, not knowing what doing, and I've got one of the guys who has been highly successful in the world of and highly regarded in the world of truffle. I didn't even know, and I was cheeky enough at the time to say, "You ever thought of coming to Oregon?" And he's like, "Well, funnily enough, I've got a business partner over there. I did my doctorate at OSU. Sure, I'd love to come over." And he helped us for the first 6 years. That's the only reason we've probably been successful.
That's amazing. I love that.
He's now retired, so he's moved on to different things. But we hooked up with our good friends, Australian truffle traders, Gavin Mel Booth. They are kind of like, there was the early adopters over there. They're like the first majority over there. And they have a very nice orchard. And they are doing that kind of succession planning that you were talking about for generations, where they're just going to roll it around. Super lovely people. They've been helping us since navigate the whole industry and everything else. We're actually opposite seasons to them, so they want us to be successful in America, so they can sell more Australian truffle over here in our summer. So
brilliant.
Yeah. So we currently do a lot of travel over there to try and understand it. It's a long way of getting to a short story, because about 4 years ago, I was over there and was going through the succession planning that he's doing, planting another hectare every year so his boys can take it over at some point. And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I'm like, "When my orchard reaches end of age, I'm going to be in my mid-70s. I don't think I want to be planting a new one and putting, getting down on my hands and knees and pruning at that stage, 1,000 trees." And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do with all the knowledge?" And it was a really, really good question. So we've been blessed with all this knowledge that we've gathered. Also, I know that anyone who starts an orchard tomorrow is not going to be in proper production until I'm basically quitting anyway. So there's no threat. And from that, we were like, okay, we can help new farmers work out how to do this, which has
That's amazing.
been an absolute blessing, because the lack of information out in the truffle world is really thin. So being able to help people navigate that has been, one of the real joys. And we end up doing a 2-day workshop every December for
That's so cool. And then
growers.
y'all also have tours that the general public could come out. Is that
we do 2 a year in January. We can do private events, and one of the more important things we try and do a hospitality industry day, at least one of those every year, where if chef wants to bring a line cook out, for instance, who doesn't get to play with truffle, we just take them out and go, okay, here's some truffle, have at it.
That's awesome.
It's chef education to me is, you touched on this. Chef education is just not there because it is such a valuable commodity. It is such a thing. Most executive chefs, the sous chef might get to play with it, but the line cook does not get to play with it, and so consequently, there's a lot of misinformation. I was talking to one of the distributors earlier this year, and it was actually in a Michelin star restaurant that they served. No names, no court martials. They were storing the truffle in rice, and everyone's heard the story. That's a common myth that you should store it in rice. Rice has nothing for it to the VOCs to glom onto. All it does is desiccate the truffle.
Just dries it out, I would imagine. It just pulls any moisture it has left.
It actually destroys the integrity of the truffle. Because part of the way you get the aroma out of the truffle is the moisture escaping drives the VOCs out with it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay.
So chef education is one of those things that we just love doing.
Excellent. Well, you've educated this chef, and I'm excited to continue this relationship and learn even more because it is such a fascinating deal. I have to ask this question: what is your favorite dish to make with Perigord truffles?
It's a
loaded question. I know.
The next one.
Okay.
Actually, I like the simpler dishes. One of my favorites has to be just a basic beef pie.
Ooh.
Because when you add the truffle at the end of making the beef base for the pie, because you're waiting for it to cool down so you don't drive off all those volatiles. When the pastry actually cooks in the oven, the volatiles are driven off, but if you're using a good pastry, it's driven off into the fat, the butter in the pastry, so you get that double whammy. And then nothing, I think, really beats poached egg. Just lightly shaved on top.
Yeah. I dig it. I love that.
But that's one of the things. I mean, when we talk about, you're talking about trimming the nubs off the peridium off the truffle. There are different textural components to it. I mean, there's a difference between shaving it, microplaning it, chopping it. Lynette makes an awesome ice cream, truffle ice cream, where she actually chops it up because it takes the place of vanilla bean.
Oh my God! I want truffle ice cream.
Yeah, and it goes. Obviously, you're not using an Oregon white to do that because they're big, diesely, garlicky notes. But things like an Oregon black truffle or Perigord truffle, they lend so much flavour and fat around the fats, and they've got that. If you get the right one, there's a lot of sweet notes to it. It's a totally different beastie doing it that way.
Oh my God! All right, truffle ice cream coming down the pipeline. Simon, thank you so much for breaking it down. I feel like we have a follow-up to do with this podcast to get even further. So maybe what we'll do is next season is I'll come out there and maybe we should do is a live cooking, or like get some Q&A because I'm sure there's questions that my listeners have that I didn't ask. But, I really appreciate you making the time to invite me down to the orchard and then also to spend this time with me here today. Where can people find information about you? I'm going to go ahead and list in the show notes as well.
CartwrightTruffles.com. I have an Instagram that I post stuff on. We're on Facebook at Cartwright Truffles. We're basically putting out this is what we're doing in the orchard today. These are the dogs. The dogs are hunting, and so it's more for education than we are in that position where we have too many customers, not enough truffle. So we really like selling fresh truffle to people, but it's not always available. So we want to make that up front. But we will do the educational days. We normally have a good chef. Maybe you'll come down and do one of be one of the chefs for us on one of the days.
I would love to.
Yeah, we invite a winery. We typically have a winery come out here and serve. So it turns into a really awesome day if you come down for a truffle adventure. And like I said, we do 2 of those a year. We limit them to 16 people because that's about all we can handle without people missing out on something, and we don't want people to miss out. Try not to make it like a tour. It is something that we typically say it's a 2-hour thing, but we normally go for 4. People can leave, but we end up having people just hang around the fire and enjoy some good food and good times. So yeah, that's available. But yeah, any questions? Let's do another one and see if people want to ask some questions. I know we barely scratched the surface and went all over the place. So
I know that's one of the things that I'm working on myself, is getting more linear. But I just there's so much more story to everything that happens in the world than just this linear line. And so yeah, we will definitely follow up. Simon, thank you so much, and I look forward to our next connection, my friend.
Fantastic.
Have a fantastic afternoon.
You too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's it for this episode of Here From Where. Thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. A huge thanks to Justin Podolesky for the music and sound production, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving forward. All the best, and happy cooking.